This is the Stages of the Soul podcast, a production of the Caritas Center. I'm Brian Dolan, and with me, the lovely, the talented Nancy Kane.
Good to be with you, as always. Looking forward to the time.
We were just about to start recording, and you asked me at the last minute, does it look like there's a plant coming out of my head? And it does look like you are crowned in leaves a little. But people know that are watching the video.
Well, I think it's a little bit of an accent, people wear hats, other people wear plants, and I'm
Sure.
wearing a plant.
If you had green hair, it would be a little bit more like what's going on with her hair today, but your
Right.
hair color is distinguished enough from the plant that we're okay.
Right. Yeah, I think
maybe that'll motivate people to go watch the video. I don't know. All these are on YouTube. I have to go check it out.
There you go.
So it is the end of 2024, and that's a big deal. And people are going to be coming up with resolutions. It's that time of year where people sing a song that no one really knows the words to. Mm-hmm. Auld Lang Syne.
They know the first part, and then they just keep repeating it over and over again.
Yeah, like I'll go and should all acquaintance be forgot? Na-na-na. Na-na. Na-na-na-na-na-na. There's the Auld Lang Syne. I don't even know what that means. Right. What does that mean? Do you know?
No, I don't.
I don't think it matters. It means like New Year's Eve.
That could be.
That's what I'm going to go with.
For Auld Lang Syne, I thought it meant for all memories or something like that.
Yeah. Again, nobody knows or cares. But there's also kissing on New Year's Eve. You and Ray will kiss your way to the new year. But I don't even stay up anymore. I gave up on that a long time ago. What about you?
Yeah, we don't. It's I think we make it to maybe 11, maybe. But most years, yeah, we just don't. I think it's just nice to have a quiet evening,
And see, I have 3 teenagers at home, and then a 12 and a 10-year-old, whatever that is. One of tweens, I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife increasingly wants me to stay up until midnight, and so I kind of try, and then at some point they all look at me and just go, "All right, just go to bed."
Right.
I'm so tired.
We're torturing you, Dad. Like, we don't want to do this anymore. This is not fun.
We release you. You are released. And the other thing people do for New Year's is resolutions. And so I have right here on this paper, I have the top 5 New Year's resolutions from 2024 as we wrap up that year.
Drum roll. Yeah, there you go.
Number 5. And this is, by the way, from YouGov. This is statistically the top 5 resolutions. Number 5, be happy.
Oh, wow.
That's it. They resolved the 5th most popular one was resolving to be happy, Nancy.
No kidding. Wow. And singing that song, who's that by? Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Oh, Bobby McFerrin.
Yeah. So that would be their theme song.
I guess. I don't really know what that would mean and how you'd measure that.
Yeah. Maybe a good mood. Like, maybe that's what it means.
But it sounds unhealthy psychologically because there's more feelings than that.
Right.
Aren't there hundreds of them? I don't know. You should know that. I don't know that.
Well, fundamentally, there's, I think 6, but, there's variations of that would move into hundreds. You've seen those icons, the different emotions and stuff. That there's one PDF file that has like 60.
Oh,
but
wow.
it's just different adjectives. But I think that be happy, it's a noble desire, but it's like, what is it grounded in? How are you going to keep being happy?
Well, Christian's really good at faking it on Sunday, right?
Right.
How you doing? I'm blessed and highly favored. Great. My kids were running late. I screamed at them, and then they were fighting in the car, but I'm happy.
Yeah, we all really were very angry with each other before we got here, but we're fine. We are just fine.
All right. Number 4 on the top 5 New Year's resolutions of 2024. No surprise. Eat healthier. Eat healthier.
Yep.
Again, I don't know. What's your baseline? How do you measure it? I don't know.
Like no fast food or No sweets or hey, now have you done New Year's resolutions yourself?
No,
Ever?
I don't. Well, no. Okay. Once I think I was the guy that decided, I forget how old I was. We had little kids. I decided I was going to work out and I got a gym membership.
Oh,
And I am part of the statistic that gives up in February.
well, you're fulfilling your role as a statistic. I mean, that's noble.
Yeah,
That
it's just I was tired and I didn't, I don't like to run or any of it. So I don't know why I decided that and I did it and then I've just never done it again. If I want to change something, I'm not going to wait till January 1st. I'm just going to change it and not worry about the timing. And then I'm just naturally a cynic, so the idea of doing something someone told me to do, I just don't want to do that.
yeah.
But what about you? Have you done resolutions?
I used to do resolutions. Uh, it's almost like I played a game with myself. I would make resolutions, um, in prior to January, those last few days, and maybe even New Year's Eve, and with just great intent, like I'm going to work out, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to read more of my scriptures, and then within what, a week, 2 weeks, it was gone.
Just gone. Yeah.
And then one year I was like, Nancy, be honest with yourself. You're not going to follow these through. So just like either make a firm commitment that you're going to do it or just don't do it at all. And so I've just given it up.
Yeah, I feel bad whenever, hosting a morning radio show, you're supposed to be the example to people, but I'm not resolving to do anything this year. How about that? Doesn't mean I'm not going to do anything this year. I'm just not going to resolve to do anything. As
So
things come up, I'm going to do them.
so what does that mean in terms of like discipline?
I don't know. I just, I don't like the idea that I have to come up with these things I'm going to improve in a calendar year.
So you have like a little rebel inside.
A very small one. Otherwise, I'm a people pleaser and I do what I'm told, generally speaking. So like, I mean, I
This
don't,
becomes resolutions.
yeah, when it comes to resolutions, I feel like I can somehow be a rebel. I don't know. Number 3 on the list, Nancy, from 2024 of resolutions: improve physical health.
Okay. Yeah. No
Okay, boring.
surprise. Yeah.
Number 2, save more money.
Good.
I'd thought about resolving to do that before, but then, with 5 kids and just in a house, you can't do that. Like Dave Ramsey tells people to have an emergency fund that'll cover any emergency. Our emergency fund disappears the first month we create it.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
we have this tankless water heater in my house, and we thought it was so responsible to get this thing. We got it about 2 years ago. It was installed wrong and stopped working. So
oh no.
now we have to fix it. We don't have to pay for parts because it's under warranty, but we have to pay for a plumber to put it in. Buy emergency fund. Buy. It's like, I don't know. So resolve to save more money. It's a great idea. When my
Yeah.
kids all grow up and leave, then I'll do that.
Yeah. Right. When you have excess income.
Listen to how crabby I get about resolutions.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was wondering. It seems like a little rebel or little curmudgeon there.
Get off my lawn. It's New Year's Eve. And you're not going to be surprised by this. Number 1 on the list of resolutions for 2024: exercise more.
Yeah. Yeah. No surprise there. No surprise there. But then there's a lot to be said. Like myself, most people do these resolutions and don't follow through. What do you think that's about? Is it?
I think oftentimes people are terrible resolution setters, as in they set too lofty of a goal. So, like, for example, the person who's never worked out before, or at least in years, says, I'm going to work out and I'm going to exercise every day. No, you're not. I mean, that's too lofty of a goal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and, and so I think they set unrealistic expectations, or, I'm going to eat healthier now. So what I'm going to do New Year's Eve is eat really unhealthy, eat all the things I love, feel horrible on January 1st, resolve to eat better. But that means some sort of dramatic shift in diet that no one's going to maintain. because
Mm-hmm.
it's just psychologically impossible to go from eating hamburgers to lettuce. And you don't allow yourself cheat days or anything. I think that's part of it. Um, I don't know. What do you probably have some fancy psychological reason people don't keep their resolutions.
I don't know if it's fancy, but I wonder if it goes to we don't do what we really don't want to do. You
That's true
know,
for me.
because I think I mean, we're different from the animals, obviously, but my puppy is pain avoidant and pleasure seeking. Like it wants the rewards, it wants the good feelings, the pets, and all that, and it does not want to be corrected and known. In a lot of ways, we're very similar to that. It's when you say discipline, when you say do the hard things, unless there's something wrapped up in it that has another reward to it that is greater than the cost of the pain, I think we won't go there. Hence
Yep.
the gym memberships. And if it requires hard work, it means that I've got to discipline myself to get up out of bed earlier in the morning to get to the gym. Um, I won't do it, you know?
Yeah, I think people prefer pleasure. I experienced that with a friend of mine, a pastor friend in his like late 40s was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is late in life to be diagnosed type 1.
Mm-hmm.
He was hospitalized for a short time when he discovered it. And then they sent him to diet classes, like ways to actually eat differently to stay healthy with diabetes.
Right.
And the people running the class were just marveling that he was interested in following it because nobody that they teach the class to has any interest in changing their diet. They just want medication.
Yeah. Right.
And he
Right.
was serious about it. I watched him do it. It was amazing the willpower he had to totally change his diet when it impacted his health. But most people don't want to do that.
Well, yeah, because the cost, he was seeing the cost of not changing was more painful than the changing. And I think that, that goes to the motivation. I think that um, in the Christian tradition, this is where spiritual practices come in because it starts to train us to do the hard things so that we're far more open to God's moving in our life when we do the spiritual practices like fasting, um, like simplicity, like solitude, like, name whatever, which, spiritual discipline you want. Those train our soul to start thinking a different way and living a different way.
Well, and I think tied to that fundamental principle in goal setting is you have to set achievable goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people just struggle to do that. They want to impress other people with their goals. So instead of saying, I'm going to have vegetables once a day, they say, I'm going to eat only vegetables from now on. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, and I think it goes to an even more important point is that if it's feeding my ego, generally my ego will shift to something more pleasure seeking.
Hmm.
Like if it's just for the ego, I won't follow through eventually because it's short lived.
Hmm.
So fill in the blank. I whatever you go shopping to get more clothes for an outing so that you can look, better. Well, that's great. But if you're trying to discipline yourself with money, the ego is going to win out. And I
Yeah.
think with goals, what we've been about in this podcast is helping people desire the right things and set the right goals.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that is what we're doing. And to even enhance the idea that doing resolutions is not probably the most successful approach to even spiritual disciplines like this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess 52% of people who set New Year's resolutions abandon them by March.
Mm-hmm.
For Christians, that's when you read the Bible in a year plan. It gets to Leviticus, I would guess.
Right.
Um, and then
Yeah,
95% of New Year's resolutions will fail before the end of the year. Only 5% of people can say at the end of December they've maintained it since January. So clearly they're not working. And even, I mean, well over half of Americans have stopped doing them altogether because I think everybody started to figure out they don't work. Uh,
mm-hmm.
although I will tell you, a lot of Christians, I'm curious to know your thoughts on the Read the Bible in a Year plan. Like there's lots of them out there. There's Bibles you can buy that are organized in a plan that you read
Mm-hmm.
it in a year. How do you feel about the Read a Bible in a Year program?
I tried it. It didn't work for me. When it comes to my devotional life, I'm a person that does the best. Like consistently, I have prayer time in the morning from when I wake up till about 7. But it changes pretty frequently from a devotional guide to the scriptures to just spending time in solitude and reflection. And that change up is what's is my temperament. So if you said for the next year you're going to have to read the Bible in this version with the sequence in this date, that I couldn't do it. I do think I have a little bit of a rebel in me, and I would be like balking at it for a while and getting bored with it. Um, I think that what's important in spiritual life is to find what works for you.
Yeah, and I've for years dissuaded people from the Read the Bible in a Year plan. And I know it sounds terrible, but some theologians have pushed back on me and guests on my morning show. But I've met people who are proud of themselves, and God bless them. They've done it multiple years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The result was not any sort of spiritual and emotional growth in looking more like Christ,
Mm-hmm.
but they sure did read a book in a year. Now, it may be God's word, but if your goal is to read it in a year as opposed to let it change you, I'm not certain what good it's going to do to read it in a year.
Right, right, exactly. Because I think that the goal in the spiritual life is to grow closer to Christ, to love Him more deeply, and to become like Him um, in His sufferings and His death, as Paul talked about. And so we can lose ourselves in the activity and never really change.
Yeah, I mean, like, what if you just said, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read John for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you spend a month on the book Gospel of John. Maybe you spend, I don't know, 6 months. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
spend a year. If you're really soaking it in and letting the Lord speak to your soul and areas where you can grow more closer to Christ and conform your life and your thinking to Him, awesome. Way better than saying, oh, did it again. Read the Bible in a year. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know how, like, I'm a slow reader, so I don't even know how effective is it to read a book that size in one
Mm-hmm.
year.
Mm-hmm.
You're just achieving some sort of awkward, not even reading comprehension goal, because comprehension isn't the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a
No,
checkbox.
it's transformation. And it really, the key has to be that you're encountering Christ. And can you do that in the Bible in a year? Sure, because the scriptures are, Hebrews talks about, live and a double-edged sword. It pierces to the core of who we are. So is is there a vitality there when we read the scriptures? Yes, but if I'm not engaging my heart and I'm just engaging my left brain, then I'm just picking up information.
Right.
I'm picking up.
I'd rather see someone spend a year in the Beatitudes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd rather see somebody spend a year, my favorite chapter, Romans 12, where
Mm-hmm.
Paul says, you got to transform the way you think. And then he spends the rest of the chapter giving incredible ways to think that normal people don't think.
Right. Right.
And so
Exactly.
you could spend your whole year trying to conform to, just even when he says, don't just pretend to love others, actually love them. You could
Mm-hmm.
do that for a year and still fail.
And I get a picture of the early church that they didn't have the written word other than, the scrolls and people that were entrusted with the teachings of Jesus that then in turn shared that with the rest of the body. But that it was so precious that it was shared in this verbal, and they read it obviously, but this uh, interactional, conversational way that there wasn't room to sit back and go, well, that's interesting. It was more, and especially because they were the church as the persecutions hit in that up to the third century, a lot was on the line. So when they engaged with the scriptures, it was tell me more. I need this. I need to be reminded again to forgive my enemy. I need to be reminded again that blessed are the poor in spirit. and that's where it's this life blood that was that they needed for their own souls, that I think we've gotten so comfortable that it, the temptation is to see the Bible as a textbook and it's a love letter.
Yeah, and that's classic American evangelicalism too, in my opinion, is the idea that it's an intellectual pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even I sound so critical, but it's a pet peeve. It's the church more like a college course.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to sit down and you're going to listen to my lecture on this. Take notes. It's not going to be a quiz, but you really ought to get this stuff written down.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't remember it when they get home. And so, yeah, I certainly intellect is part of the journey. But if
Mm-hmm.
your engagement with scripture is, let's see if I can read it all in a year, and let's see if I can take some great notes on a lecture, you're missing it.
Right. And also the in the Psalms and the Old Testament talks about meditating on the word. Deuteronomy talks about that. What they meant by that is that you take it in, and meditation was like the root of that word is like a cow chewing its cud.
Hmm.
When the grass comes in, it like keeps chewing and it keeps chewing and it keeps chewing, and then eventually it swallows. And that's what meditating on the word was really intended to be, is that you're taking it and you're like, okay, wait, this is super important. I need to really sit with this. What's the implications of this? What does this mean for me? How is this going to change me? What am I doing that is not consistent with the take blessed are the poor in spirit? What's not consistent with blessed and poor in spirit? Oh, okay. And what does this tell me about God? So I'm just really marinating in it, and in that process, all my faculties are getting used. I might even add visualization of picturing Jesus saying this to the disciples as he's talking about blessedness, and imagining the disciples look on their faces as they're taking it in, how their minds were being blown by this radical teaching. Now I'm not just memorizing the scripture or learning it. All of me is engaged in it.
And now, you mentioned to me an alternative to setting a New Year's resolution is to create a rule of life.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like cursory familiar with this concept. So give me the 30,000-foot view of what a rule of life would be.
So, rule of life historically was established by one of the Desert Fathers in the 4th century, and then really became more popular by Benedict of Nursia. And it's a guideline for how to live your spiritual life with God. But it's what's different from a resolution is that you sit with the Lord. And I have people break out their rule of life to 4 areas: physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. Um, and quite simply, put a divided paper into 4 boxes and label each of those boxes, and start to think and pray through what has been the things in your life that have enhanced your overall growth in Christ. And for me, this is where the rule of life became really helpful, is because I realized my resolution often was, I'm going to do Bible study. I'm going to really dig into the book of John, and I'd have all these lofty goals and they just weren't being followed through. But then when I did a deeper reflection, I realized where the growth was when there was variety. It was always showing up and allowing time to show up with Christ and be present with him, but it came in different forms. And so the rule of life then looks at, um, well, let's take emotionally. What things do I need in my life to emotionally stay present with God? So it might be I need to get a good night's sleep. I need to really have enough time in the morning to really do a Lectio Divina, to check to see what's going on with my soul. Um, I need to have a relationship with someone that has accountability, that I can share my thoughts with, a spiritual director, perhaps. And then each of these areas, you look to see what's the best fit for you, and then by God's grace, ask Him to fulfill it. So you're very much in conjunction with God, and it's also gentle, and it's also fluid in that you're looking at what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you in the spiritual life.
Now, you shared with me some information that there's actually some historical figures who have done this before.
And
What?
that was the beautiful thing is when I was researching on this, when the rule of life became really important for me, I noticed that there was Martin Luther King, Dorothy Day, and John Wesley all had their own rule of life. And but Martin Luther King in particular was really quite stunning in that it made sense to me once I saw his rule of life, what kept him going and also what kept his followers going, because he asked his followers to do the same thing that he was doing. And let me read that just real quick here. Meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus. Remember always that nonviolent movement in Birmingham, Alabama seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. Walk and talk in the manner of love, for God is love. Pray daily to be used by God in order that all might be free. Sacrifice personal wishes in order that all might be free. Observe with both friend and foe the ordinary rules of courtesy. Seek to perform regular services for others in the world. Refrain from violence of fist, tongue, or heart, and strive to be in good spiritual and bodily health. Follow the directions of the movement and the captain of the demonstration. And when I read his rule of life, I thought, I can see where everyone that was passionate about following him as well as his own life, he was living that out.
Yeah, and so, someone might say, what's different than that in that list from resolutions?
I think that it's what you value and living into those values. Whereas resolutions can be more of, well, for sure, I'm going to work out 3 times a week. Whereas a value is what's really important for me and how do I live into that. So it's less of a rule following and more of a being thoughtful as to what's really important and then being mindful that you're living into that, which is important. So obviously for us as Christians, living a life that gives glory to God is important, but then how do I break that out into my daily life? This is where the rule comes in. What will help me live that more abundantly and more freely and more fully? Um, and so, what things do I need to keep in mind so that I'm living into that goal, which is to become more like Christ? And
Yeah,
that's why I said earlier. Well, sorry, that's why I said earlier is that we do what we really want. We don't do what we really don't want. So the rule of life is really doing that heart check of what do I really want, and being honest with myself.
yeah, and his seemed less task oriented and more
Mm-hmm.
like principles and as you said, values to live by. Like even if you look at the first one, meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
could mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
could mean one teaching of Jesus to love your enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and you could do that for 5 minutes while you're driving to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It could also mean you spend 3 hours reading,
The Sermon
and thinking about it and praying about it and reading the Sermon on the Mount. It could even mean that maybe you watch a great film that has something to do with loving your enemy,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, so it's not necessarily a task or a specific job or action. It's a wider principle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
He has a long list. He has lots of them.
Yeah, he had quite a few, but
He had 10.
yeah. But each one carrying its own weight of remembering always nonviolent movement is to seek justice and reconciliation. Super important. Walk and talk in a manner of love, for God is love. Pray daily to be used by God in order that all might be free. I think each one carried its own significant weight.
So then would you, as a practice, kind of read through these each morning to remind yourself or maybe have them posted somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kept mine. I keep mine in the dresser, the little, I guess you call it nightstand next to my bed, and review it once a year. I've had the same one for quite a few years, but as we were thinking about these things, I think I'm going to change it because I've changed um, to something that's more realistic with my life and energy and what I need right now. But again, it's keeping that singular goal. Søren Kierkegaard said to will one thing, and he has writing on that. And that I think we get so distracted with our wills that we lose our focus as to what we're really about. And I think New Year's resolutions is a weak attempt to try to get to that. The rule of life is really a spiritual practice where you say, what am I really, really, really about? At the end of my days, what do I want to say that I live for? And with that, then my rule of life will be shaped into that. So yeah, like I have exercise in one of the boxes, but the larger goal is I exercise not because I want to be all that fit and look good. It's much more so that I can do the work that God's called me to do. Again, back to what do I really want? Well, I really want to love God. I really want to fall deeper and deeper in love with Him every day. So, what's going to help me do that? Well, if I'm physically not feeling well, I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to want to think about spiritual things. I'm going to want to think about how miserable I feel. And working out and being physically healthy helps that. Doesn't mean that I can control it, but it can help that.
So now for someone who is intrigued by the concept of not doing a resolution and coming up with a rule of life, which again, it sounds like it's one, but it doesn't have, it could be one, doesn't have to be one.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, people have Google, they can look it up. I'm sure there's lots of different interpretations and guides on how to do it. What's the fundamental beginning for someone to develop their rule of life?
I think first, look at what's most important for you in your life, the fundamentals. It seeks to ask the question of who do I want to be and how do I want to live? So, what kind of person do I want to be daily, ultimately, that I may not be living into now, but eventually I want to live into fully? And what do I want my life to stand for? So, one of the things that the Lord has kept putting on my heart is in a world where more and more people are just cranky and rude, and I want to be light. I want to be truth. I want to be a light bearer where people pick up something different about me. So that means then every day I'm going to be mindful of my interactions and am I bringing light and truth and beauty? So the rule of life really gets specific with that. And I would encourage listeners, if they're interested in doing this, is to be gentle with yourself. The first time I did it, my 4 boxes were over the top unrealistic. I can't remember what I put in, but I remember a year later going, "What? Like, where did you think that you would even get close to doing this stuff? Like, what, what were you drinking there?" It just wasn't realistic.
What are the 4 boxes again? The 4
Yes,
areas?
physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually.
And you come up with one for each or a couple for each?
It doesn't matter. Again, there's no rule. The intellectual can also, actually, as I say that, it's relationally, emotionally, spiritually, um, intellectually, and relationally.
Well, let's go through each one and come up and not that, and people should adopt these as their own, but just kind of help give us a more practical look at each of them. So, spiritually, what might be a rule of life somebody would have spiritually?
Spiritually could be, well, one, going to church, being a part of the fellowship of believers um, regularly. I think that I'm trying to think of stuff I put in my rule of life. Saturdays, traditionally, I've changed it since I'm not following it now, but Saturdays I would spend time in prayer and more intentional scripture study, um, praying daily. The goal for some, maybe, which would be a wonderful goal, is to pray throughout the day, being mindful of Christ's presence with you. But I would choose, for again, people starting this, choose 2 or 3 things. Don't fill it out with 10 things because you won't be able to follow it. but two or three things where you say, well, I can choose to be, like I was saying earlier, I can choose to be a light in the world. And so during the day, I'm going to pray that the Lord would bring good and true and beautiful things toward in through me that I can express to other people. And so I'm going to just keep that in front of me, keep that in front of me, keep that in front of me.
What about
Emotional, I think it's doing the Lectio Divina, checking, examining your soul at the end of the night of where the Spirit's showing me that I have been maybe operating out of my ego. Maybe I have unconfessed uh, unforgiveness that's going on. Um, Maybe I have some anger that I've been harboring that I'm now aware that I'm doing that. So it's being keenly aware of your emotional life: sad, angry, sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender, hope. What are the predominant emotions that I've been seeing in my life? That those negative emotions I need to deal with.
what about physical? Are we having to get a gym membership now in a rule of life and work out every day?
Yeah, well, my for this year with having a puppy, and Buddy is now in puppy adolescence, which I understand is comparable to teenage adolescence.
Ugh, sounds
It
miserable.
really is. I mean, he's just discovered that he can mark things,
Oh
with
no.
his. So he's marking all over, just all
Oh,
over.
good.
Yeah, I mean, just being a male dog. But he does better with walks. And so one of the things that I have to do that I need to do, but I want to do as well, is take him for walks in the morning and the afternoon. So a good, robust walk in the afternoon and a shorter walk in the morning. And that's the physical, keeping myself active. Other people might want to do a gym membership or, again, make it realistic. Make it something that you're already doing to some extent and maybe stretch yourself just a little bit.
Okay. Now, what about relational?
Relational, I would encourage people to find relationships that they're pouring into and relationships that they're being poured into, that they themselves are receiving. So I meet with a spiritual director, about once a month for about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. And that is it's just fuel for my soul of having someone who is willing to be honest with me and call me out on my own BS,
Hmm.
and also challenge me. And but I also think it's important for I think a lot of people. It's one thing to have friends. It's another thing to be intentional about where are the people that God has in my life that I'm needing to be intentional, loving and caring and showing mercy. And it might be a neighbor. It might be someone that's in their small group. It might be someone they know at work. But who can I be pouring into and showing love? It might be even general, just a way of life where it's a both and. I'm receiving, but I'm also giving out.
Is it possible that a rule of life in that area could be general enough where you're saying, I'm going to identify this year
Yes,
people who are pouring into me and people I can pour into?
yes, well
That
said.
seems achievable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's the point of the rule, is you're setting your boundary lines in terms of how you want to live. So again, very different from a resolution or rule in the hard sense of the term, but more in terms of here's the fences around my soul and my life that I want to live into.
And so, how would you compare all this to like the people have a life verse or they have a philosophy of life? This is more specific, yeah?
Yeah, and I've had a life verse, but I don't know how often I think about it. You know,
Yeah.
um, I think it's great to have a life verse, but back to what we were talking about earlier, how much are you actually intentional about living into it?
Yeah.
And the rule of life. Um, some people might want to keep it in their Bible, or I keep it in Bible bedside because it's accessible. But where it's a constant reminder, or put it on your refrigerator if you're comfortable with that, where you're constantly seeing it and you're thinking about it. for me, what's more realistic is reviewing it once a month or once every couple months, saying, is this still realistic for me, or do I need to change this? And again, in the presence of God, because he knows us so well.
I like that it's so much less intense than resolutions. And I mean, with the way technology works, it's not hard to set up a once a month reminder on your phone or a calendar appointment to just revisit it. I like that you're saying it's flexible. If you decide in February this was garbage and you want to do it over again, fine. Is there a way in which you ought to have accountability in this? Share it with somebody, or is this really better on your own?
The whole accountability, I have mixed feelings. I found accountability, it depends on what your motivation is. But yeah, we need people that know us and that can speak into our lives. But I think sometimes that accountability notion has gotten kind of gone sideways, and that I need to be responsible for me. My choices, my actions, my words, my sin. And yes, I need other people to speak truth into my life, which is, I think, where, for me, spiritual direction, well, my husband, number one, but then two, spiritual direction comes in of someone that I'm saying, here is me unedited. What do you see? I think with peer relationships, that's where I can see it gets kind of wonky. Because now the person's like, well, I noticed something about you that you haven't noticed about yourself, and you haven't invited it, and you're not open to it, and suddenly someone feels they have the authority to speak into it. So, I mean, I could be way off on this, but yeah, not a fan of accountability.
I wonder if I'll mess the whole thing up by saying somebody should resolve to make a rule of life. Is that maybe you make a resolution to make a rule of life and then next year you start it? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we could say we encourage people to think through how rule life could be helpful for them.
There you go. I can achieve that. I can think.
Yes, I can think, and I can ponder, and I can investigate. I can look online, rules of life, and I can pray, and I can ask the Lord about that, and He does His wonderful work in us to create the desires of our heart.
The Stages of the Soul podcast has been a production of the Caritas Center for Christian Formation in partnership with Stained Glass Media. Don't forget to subscribe to, rate, and review this podcast to help us spread the word. Nancy Kane is a licensed professional clinical counselor, retired professor, author, and speaker. Brian Dolan is a radio host, podcaster, and former public school teacher. Be sure to check out the Caritas Center's Spiritual Formation Program, as well as more information about this podcast at thecaritascenter.com. That's thecaritascenter.com. And last, but certainly not least, special thanks to the man, the myth, and the legend, Ray Kane, for his guidance, support, and expertise. Talk to you next time.
This is a Stained Glass Media production.